Today we're going to talk about polarizing filters, when to use them, when not to use them, and how they can improve your landscape photography. So in my videos, you've heard me talk about polarizing filters before, whether it be a mini gear review on the filter I use, whether it be my beginner's mistakes in landscape photography and wishing I'd started using filters sooner, to just in general my videos when you see me put a polarizing filter on or I comment on putting on a polarizing filter. In my opinion, a polarizing filter can be one of the big improvements a piece of gear can make to your landscape photography if you know how to use it, when to use it, and what it does for your photography. So we're going to dive into that a little bit more. Okay, before I dive into the polarizing filter, I just want to take a moment and ask you to hit the like button on this video if you end up liking the content, and be sure to subscribe to my channel if you want to see future landscape photography content. That's some of the best things you can do to help a content creator, and I'd really appreciate it. Now, let's get into the polarizing filter. So, what does a polarizing filter do? Well, at its essence, it helps remove glare from non-metal objects. So it can remove glare from things like leaves, it can remove glare from water, and other natural objects that you might find while you're out photographing landscape photography. That even includes things like the sky. So why is that important, and what can it do for your photography? Well, when you remove the glare, that helps do a couple things. One, think things like water and even leaves, it removes the reflections. It takes that sheen of brightness off. And that glare often causes some form of desaturation. So greens aren't as saturated as they are. Fall colors aren't as saturated as they are. Water has light reflecting up off of it, making it hard to see the texture of the water or the rocks that are underneath. If you're at a waterfall, the water coming over it not only has a glare, and the polarizing filter can help remove some of that, but all the rocks that are nearby catching that spray end up with a reflection of that water, that thin layer of water, and it actually reduces the texture and detail, makes them a little brighter. With the polarizing filter, when you put that on, it helps remove that glare, cut through that reflection, and suddenly those rocks near the waterfall, behind the waterfall, get darker. You start to be able to see the textures more, and your photos become a little more interesting. Even when you're photographing like a landscape where you're getting a lot of blue sky in the image, there's a lot of moisture in the air, there's a lot of reflections happening between your lens and that blue in the sky because of the way those particles catch. If you put on your polarizing filter, what that'll do is it'll help minimize that glare, and it actually turns your sky a darker blue. It can make your clouds a little more deep, a little more vibrant. So that's what's using a polarizing filter can help in your landscape photography. It just sort of takes care of that natural glare that's on things, whether it's an early morning, there's a little bit of dew, or the sun shining off of the leaves or the water, and things like that. By reducing that glare, by using and adjusting that polarizing filter, you can make your colors a little more saturated, make things a little bit more texture, more detail of the texture, and items like that. So like, at the waterfalls, the sheen goes away from the rocks, you get that nice color, nice texture of the rocks. When photographing leaves or autumn colors or grasses or anything like that, those greens just get a little darker, or those reds and oranges and yellows just get a little bit darker because that polarizing filter cuts off some of that light that's causing that glare, allowing you to see the true saturation of those leaves and making everything in your image a little more vibrant. Now, there are a couple things to be aware of if you're using a polarizing filter. For example, if you're out photographing a vista with the blue skies and you're putting your polarizing filter on for the sky, you get better results if the sun is coming across 90 degrees to your shot. So say you're shooting this way, your best results from the polarizing filter will be if the sun is coming from this direction or this direction at a 90-degree angle. That's when your polarizing filter is most effective and filters out the most light that's causing that glare. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're photographing into the sun, or the sun is behind you in photographing, then that polarizing filter is not going to have very much effect at all because of how the light rays work and how that glare is caused. It sort of minimizes the effect that polarizing filter can have. One thing to keep in mind as well is that a polarizing filter can have a one-stop, give or take effect on your image, so it'll make it one stop darker. That can change. Again, part of that's depending, is the sun at 90 degrees? What angle are things? What type of filter do you have? But you're going to be looking at about losing one stop. In some cases, that's awesome. So for example, I like to photograph waterfalls. Losing that one stop actually helps me slow my shutter speed down, usually to about where I want it, with just a polarizing filter, which is sort of cool. But there's other cases, if you're out photographing autumn leaves or things like that, and there's a little bit of breeze blowing, that one stop could be the difference between getting nice, sharp, crisp leaves with a fast shutter speed, or slowing your shutter speed down too much, and now you're going to get some motion blur. So just be aware of that one stop you're losing. Sometimes I think it's an advantage, other times it's just something you need to be aware of so you can compensate with either ISO or shutter speed to make sure you're stopping motion in case that one stop causes you to lose that. Another area that the polarizing filter can be problematic is if you are photographing a vista that's large on a wide angle lens. Once you start to go past about 24 millimeters on a full frame camera, you'll start to see some tonal variations across that sky because the polarizing filter can't capture that whole view with the same amount of filtering. So what that does is you get these tonal variations across the sky. So oftentimes you'll be photographing, you'll be turning the filter to get it adjusted, and you'll see this dark spot come across, but it can't cover the whole image. So now your image has this variation. So when you're on a wide angle lens, if you're shooting something where it's going to be obvious that there's tonal variations like a blue sky, then that is going to be problematic, and that may be a situation where you don't want to use the polarizing filter because you're going to get those, which would be very difficult to correct even with post-processing. Similarly related to that, if you're doing a panorama where you're stitching together multiple images, that's another situation that you could introduce this tonal variation into your image because you're shooting like this and that polarization is not equal across the whole scene. And when you start stitching it together, you'll get these bands through your image. So that's another case where using a polarizing filter may not be the best choice for you. So today we're going to try to demonstrate the use of a polarizing filter. We're going to move up towards these falls up here, and we're going to shoot at them. This is a good subject, I think, to sort of show this. And also, I'm a sucker for waterfalls. I love to shoot waterfalls. So we're going to shoot this. We're going to get set up off to the little left side of that, sort of shoot into it from this side of the creek over there. And we'll go over how filters can attach to the camera, how to adjust it, what it looks like in the back of the camera as you make those adjustments. And we'll take a shot with the filter and without the filter that we'll compare later in the video. And we'll just see how things go from there. We moved here a little closer to the falls, and first let's show you the circular polarizer. This is the circular polarizer, just a round filter. It's got threads that fit onto the camera. They do make magnetic systems as well, in which case you put like a little plate here, a little adapter here, and then your filter just snaps in. Super convenient, but this is a threaded circular polarizer filter. It's an 82 millimeter, which fits this thread on this lens, which is a 14-30, Nikon 14-30 lens, and it just screws on here. Now this polarizer, it adjusts by turning because the light rays are coming off different ways. So it's the turning of this that gets the filtering in this at the angle that cuts through that glare. So once you get your thread on, you actually make adjustments to it. And those adjustments will change if you're in landscape mode and you get it set, but then you suddenly switch to portrait mode. Well, those filters are going to switch the way that light's coming through. So you need to readjust your polarizing filter to cut through that glare again when you switch orientation of your camera. So it is something you play with a little bit. There's not necessarily a science to it as much as you look through the back of the camera for the look you desire as you're turning that thread. So let's get this on here. Like I said, attaches on the front, screws on the front of the lens, and now the filter's on there. And then, like I said, to adjust it, you just turn this different ways as you're looking through the viewfinder or the live view to see what it's doing to the reflections you're trying to move. It's generally pretty obvious unless you're in one of those situations where the reflections in the sun's coming either directly from behind you or directly in front of you, in which case you won't see a whole lot, and that's probably a sign your polarizer's not doing a whole lot. We sort of purposely set up off a little bit of the side here of the falls, and we should see a pretty good effect as we adjust that polarizing filter. So I'm going to get my composition set up here, do a quick and easy one from here. I'll show you the back of the camera as we adjust the polarizing filter on the front so you can see what happens. Okay, so what I've got here is I've already sort of set my exposure. I've watched the histogram. I'm being very careful because even though I've got some sky up in this way, the brightest part of this image is that where the water comes over. And I've talked about this in other videos. That can be the difficult part of a waterfall. That is super bright, and so if my histogram is bumping over there, it is probably where that water crests the edge, and I don't want to lose a lot of detail in that. So I've got the exposure set there. I'm on a wide angle lens shooting at about 21-ish millimeters. And I got my focus point right in here. It's a wide lens. This rock could go just a touch fuzzy, but I'm okay with that for the purpose of this demonstration. What we're going to do is, right now I have the polarizing filter on, but as you can see, there's a lot of reflection in the water. So what we're going to do is adjust it. And again, you adjust it by turning that in the front, and look at that. See how that reflection just sort of diminished, went away? That's what the filter does. It is taking that glare off the water. My rocks start to get dark. I can see the texture. There's a lot of texture in these rocks right here where this water comes off. I can see the rocks under the water. Watch, I'm going to switch it back to the way it was before. And look, I got this big old streak of white coming through here. Nothing's really changed much with the exposure with the filter on, but I can't really see those rocks under there anymore. There's more glare over here. So that's what we want. Let's just take this shot. This is with it not really adjusted correctly. Take this shot. Now I'm going to adjust the polarizing filter with my live view. So I'm just going to turn the filter. There, I start to lose all the reflection. There, I've lost all reflection. Like I said, you can just watch this. There's not, like I can't say turn it half a turn, quarter turn. It's just really sort of turn it based on the angle. We're going to take this shot and we're going to see what we get. So I've switched into portrait mode here, and I've made no adjustment to the filter. And look, because I changed the angle of the camera, the filter's not doing its job. I've got all of this reflection through here, and I'm catching all that glare. Let's just go ahead and take another quick shot of that, just to have it. But when you're switching from that landscape mode to portrait mode, you need to change your orientation. So now let's adjust the filter. We're gonna just turn the filter again, live view on. There we go. I turned the filter again. Nearly all the, let's see if we can turn it a little more. There. Nearly all the reflections are gone. Take my shot. And there we go. So again, the filter, it needs to be turned the correct way in order to reduce that glare, block that glare, which here changes how the reflections are. It's having some effect up on the leaves up in here. But that's how it works. Just be very wary of, if you're in landscape mode, switch to portrait, that you're going to have to make some filter adjustments as well. So I hope you found this information on the basics of using a polarizing filter helpful. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to see future landscape photography content from me, including tips, tricks, mini gear reviews, behind the scenes, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any content from me in the future. And thank you for watching.